can I just ask, I know that you're in adult ed because you've just said that. Can I just ask who else is in the ACL sector here? You are, great, okay. Well, for those of you who aren't, recognizing and recording progress and achievement, there's no rocket science to it. It really is just about good teaching and learning practice. And when the system was formalized, it did take the best of the existing practice in the ACL sector. Now, I've given you a handout there because it is a very formal system. It's five-stage process, and there are various things that OFSTED will look for. If I give you just a little bit of detail about our RARPA system, we were last inspected in 2009, and we were outstanding overall. And we were told that our RARPA arrangements were outstanding. And when we started to expand Moodle, it was initially a case of just uploading the paper forms and the paper systems. But then we started to look at how we could actually embed everything in Moodle. And what we've done is designed a template for most of our new Moodle courses that includes most of the activities that I'm going to show you. Now, the problem that we have in adult ed is that, well, certainly within my organisation, Old and Lifelong Learning, the overwhelming majority of our tutors are part-time, and some may only teach 2 hours a week. So we needed a system that was very simple, that they would want to use and be able to use. And Grania this morning talked about digital abilities. That is really an issue in adult ed, and not just for our learners, but for the tutors as well. So we needed something that was simple but effective, and that's what we've tried to do with our course template. Now, I've given you a handout that shows the five-stage process and the typical evidence, so I'm not going to dwell over these, but you'll have that to refer to when I talk about individual activities and modules that we use. And the list of these is also on the handout. And we've just started to use ILP. In fact, I'm piloting it in one of my classes, because as well as being responsible for developing and managing Moodle, I do teach as well languages. So you'll see what the Ulcc PLP looks more or less off the shelf. And really, you know, you guys, I take my hat off to you. The amendments you've made are absolutely fantastic. Right, link to a file or website or Composer web page. I've looked at these two together. Composer web page, something very, very simple in Moodle, very simple to do. You don't really need to be a huge techie to be able to do it. You can use that for stages 1 and 2. And I'd like to show you examples from a French course. So we've got one clickable link for induction, and then that opens up to absolutely everything that is used in induction, and that's part of our standard template. And all that the tutor would need to do is put in their own course information sheet and a summarised scheme of work if they've got one. But everything else is already there, all loaded up with all of our service documents. And then we also use it to put up aims and objectives. Now, there is an add-in module now for Moodle for lesson objectives, but of course in adult ed, when you are observed and OFSTEDed, you must have your aims and objectives both there, and it's really easy to put them in a web page, and then all of the resources that you use for your lesson can just be listed underneath. And if anybody misses a lesson, then they can see there exactly what you wanted them to have achieved by the end of it. So very flexible web page. Moodle book, in theory, you could use for all 5 stages. We are not using it for all 5 stages. I would say we're using it for probably 4, from 2 to 5 onwards. It is an add-on module, but it's basically like a series of connected web pages. We've used it extensively in a template that we've built up for Year 1 language courses, where we've set up a number of topics in books. And within each book, you'll have different topics, and then different resources within each topic. So, you know, the book on shopping, you click on that and you get shopping, different types, shopping for food, shopping for clothes, etc. And then if you click on clothing and other items, you've got a lot of guidance materials. You've got links to learning activities. And most of these are differentiated activities because the books are there. These Year 1 courses are there for all of our learners, but the tutor probably does not use those resources and activities in class. So these books really do tick a lot of boxes when it comes to, you know, differentiation. Assignment we use pretty extensively. We do use advanced uploading of files for our Petals courses, preparing to teach in the lifelong learning sector, where course reflections are a key feature of the course, and it's part of the assessment. But we also use online text assignment as a learner diary. And we find that this is just so superior to a paper learner diary, because generally it's done at a point where the learner has actually gone home, reflected about the class, perhaps they've done their homework and realised, yeah, they understood it or they didn't understand it, or they would like to do a bit more in a certain area. And the value of those to the tutor as well as to the learner is just immense. Now here's an example, it was an end of course assessment from someone who was on counselling. And just the very final phrase, I've gained so much personally and professionally, I wish I'd done it before. I mean, if all of our learners said that at the end of a course, then, you know, we could go home feeling that we really had done a good job. And I think that the detail that you get by doing this online is just so much more valuable than anything that people tend to put on paper. Choice, very simple activity in Moodle. It's basically one question where there's you can only select one answer. It's great for testing, understanding at a specific moment in time. You can use them for anything. You know, when do you want the class night out? You know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever. Very, very flexible and so easy to set up. Here's an example from a counselling course. Again, so if you click on ethical framework, then you've got 3 questions. 3 answers. The question is, the ethical framework is, 3 possible answers, and then from the analysis here, you've got a list of all of the learners who selected a specific answer. So nobody selected the first one, a list of things counsellors do. You've got 4 who selected a guide for counsellors, and 6 who selected a strict rule of conduct. So as a tutor, you can see immediately who has understood and who hasn't, and you could use that to plan your recap or revision, or your one-to-one feedback to your learners on the diary. And if you have been tackling something that's quite tricky, a quick choice gives you very valuable information. Database you could use for 3 separate stages. And we do use them for all 3, but I'd like to give you an example that's for stages 4 and 5, where we have a jewellery making course on Moodle, and the tutor has put up photographs of the learner's work, which she does on an ongoing basis. And then at the end of the course, she'll have these on a slideshow in the class, and the learners will vote on their favourite pieces. But also for new learners coming in, the next time the tutor teaches this course, they've got plenty of ideas there for things that they can make. And it just motivates learners so much, either to have a piece of their work pictured on Moodle for everybody to see, or to have the possibility of having their work on Moodle. Feedback is a module that we use. Some people use feedback, some people prefer questionnaire. We like feedback because of the independence it gives you in making up your own questions. It's very flexible. And we use it for stages 3, 4, and 5. Pretty extensively in 3 and 4. And on stage 5, for stage 5, our course template has the learner course evaluation feedback. It's a service-wide thing, already loaded up. And we've got some analysis here from one of those. You can export results of this to Excel, which means that, if you like analysing figures and you like making your own graphs, you can have lots of fun with that. But for tutors who, perhaps don't have great IT skills, they can see the results visually at a glance. It's another reason why we particularly like feedback. And because everything is in a different colour, you can quickly, I think we've got about 33 questions on this one, but you can very, very quickly go through it and just see all of the areas where there may be some concerns. And where there are, you can then go back to the detail of which course it was, and even which learners actually, put up those comments. Forum, of course, brilliant for ongoing interaction with the tutor and learner to learner as well. Again, you can use it for 3 different stages. I'd like to show you an example from a City and Guilds photography course for stages 4 and 5. City and Guilds had a competition running on their website. Anyone who was doing their course could upload photographs, or a course tutor could upload photographs of his students. So there was a competition run within the class to decide which images should be uploaded. And I chose this one, not just because I love Chats with House, but you can see up there, we had 51 replies. Now that just shows you the great extent of interaction here. There were a lot of comments on it, other people putting up theirs. And your forum, as somebody today mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was Grania or one of the other presentations I went to, forum interaction doesn't just happen. You do, as the tutor, have to encourage it, but using it for something like this is really a great way of encouraging that interaction. Glossary, you could use glossary for lots of different things. You can use it as to show examples of learners' work, and we use it in a large number of our courses and in staff areas. I've got an example here from ESOL, where the tutor did a lesson on English idioms that include colour, and in class they concentrated on blue, so the homework was that the learners had to put up a different colour idiom onto the glossary, and I just quite liked that one. It was rather neat. But again, the tutor got a very good response from the learners. Quiz. Quiz is one of the activities that is not built into our course template because, of course, the questions have to be individually geared to the course, but I'm always available to help tutors build up their quizzes. And they are excellent for records of learners' work, learner self-assessment, And if you design your feedback carefully, you can guide learners to finding out the right answer for themselves. I've got an example of the analysis here from a French quiz. Where there are gaps, it just shows that the same learner has made multiple attempts. So you can see their scores and which question they got right. So 0 out of 1 means they got it wrong, 1 out of 1, they got it right. You can see the time that it took them to do the entire quiz and the overall feedback that they got when they finished. But each question has its own inbuilt feedback. But it's very good, again, if you've been teaching something that's a bit tricky, you can analyse which questions people got right and which ones they didn't get right. So again, that can feed into your planning, your feedback, and so on. Just trying to remember if quiz results can be downloaded to Excel. Dan, do you recall if they can?
Pretty sure they probably can.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of analysis that you can do there. Wiki, great for records of learners' knowledge, and you can set up very, very simple wikis, just one page. I put one in a tutor training course where we were looking for ideas for teaching activities and icebreakers, and eventually we'll move that into our quality staff room, and then when people are after ideas, they can just click on the wiki, and at some point I'll work on linking up different pages. But there's no reason why a simple one-page wiki can't work. Right, we have just started using ILP, PLP, whatever you want to call it. Now this obviously covers all stages for RARPA. When you take it straight off the shelf from Moodle.org, your student info is automatically generated from details that you put in Moodle. So, for example, we tend to just put in our learners' email addresses, so the name and the email will come up. If you put in their address and phone number as well, then that will come up. Then you have 3 blank text boxes, and we are using a template at the moment to fill those in. So I've blanked out the name because this is a real one. So student info automatically generated. Then the first box we've decided to use for the results of initial assessment. Because this is a language course, we're looking at learning style and then speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And once we expand this out beyond languages, we're going to look at ESOL, and so the same template will do for that. So that's a tutor-only input box. So the tutor will input the results of initial assessment. Then the second box is a learner-only box. And there are certain questions that they have to ask there. Why do you want to answer there? Why do you want to do this course? What skills do you have that will help you? And what concerns do you have? Oh, and additionally, in the tutor box, the course outcomes are there. Now, some people will say general course outcomes don't have any place in an individual learning plan, but in a way they do, because not everybody on the course will be expected to achieve all of the course outcomes. So if you've got general course outcomes, some people you would expect to achieve all of those and more. Some you may only expect to achieve 70% of those, and that will be reflected in targets that you set. And then others will achieve most of them. But the course outcomes will give learners a very general idea of what they should be aiming for. So I would argue that they do have a place there. Tutor-only box, learner-only box. Then there's a shared text box. And we've put a question in there that forces learners to input their personal goals. So what personal goals would you like to achieve in addition to the course outcomes? So again, they can refer back to the course outcomes. If they want to achieve something that isn't there, then they put it in. Now, this particular learner has a a friend's daughter-in-law. So her personal outcomes are all around being able to speak to her daughter-in-law and speak to her son's in-laws. And the tutor can add to that either by perhaps suggesting another personal goal or by commenting on whether or not those personal goals are realistic. Now, for this level, those are realistic personal goals, but if this was a year one course, I'd be thinking, hey, no way are you going to be able to, you know, have a proper conversation with your in-laws. Now, we've come up with these templates really to make it easier for our learners to use, given, you know, the average level of IT skills. And because it's some future date, you know, we'll roll it out to the whole service. It's a start towards thinking of, you know, how do we come up with a template that suits the whole service. So we'll see how this works in certain areas where these templates are relevant, and then we'll see how we can amend them. Then you have individual targets and progress reviews. So targets here, I've put 3 specific targets for this learner, and these sort of complement the course outcomes. You know, they're not exactly the course outcomes, but if this learner wants to fully achieve the course outcomes, then these personal targets have to be met. And then there's a progress review. Now, at the beginning of the year, I had all of this on paper, and for each learner, there were something like 7 or 8 pieces of paper in my teaching file. Now it's all on one screen in Moodle, all in one place. My learners can access everything to do with their personal learning plan all in one place instead of having to flick through their files to look for certain things. And whenever I want to comment on something, you know, if I feel that they really have worked particularly well in an area, I can put up a comment anytime. I don't need to wait until we do our, you know, end of term review or whatever. And equally, if any of the learners are having a particular problem, they can put it up here as well. So, you know, apart from those templates, we haven't really changed the individual learning plan that you can actually download. And, you know, so far, well, from my point of view as a tutor, it certainly does what I want it to do. And my learners, I know it's early days because I've only just, you know, recently put this on Moodle, but they like the fact that it's so easily accessible and they can find everything. And they can go in and they still use a learner diary that they will fill in at the end of most sessions. But if they have commented on something and I've given a comment back, often they've said, since I put these up, that they will actually look at their targets and see how all of this interaction in the learner diary is tying up with these targets. So they're beginning to see everything on Moodle as you know, something organic and integral rather than having a file that's just got lots of different bits and pieces that fulfill different functions. So early days, but the response is positive. So, in all of this, what's the advantage between, you know, having all this on, doing all this RARPA stuff on Moodle and doing it on paper? I think more than a paper version of RARPA, Moodle encourages a continuous cycle. You don't see feedback and review as being at a specific date or end of term or whatever. It's absolutely continuous. There's a much greater interaction on the part of the learner. And I think you're encouraging your learners also to be more autonomous. You're encouraging them to reflect about their learning and how they're doing and what they can actually do to improve. The feedback cycle is definitely more efficient because if you set up all of these activities so that where possible, you have an email alert to the tutor and email alerts to the learners, then both parties know when comments have been put up. And it is much more efficient to do this as you go along, rather than having 30 learners to comment on it by a particular date. Hard and soft outcomes are recorded. In adult learning, especially in non-accredited courses, soft outcomes are really important. For example, if someone is attending a French or Spanish or whatever conversation class, and they're pretty fluent, how do they measure, and how do you measure their progress? So if they've come back from holiday, for example, and put on their learner diary, my neighbour really complimented me on how my pronunciation had improved, or really complimented me on the fact that I used the subjunctive. That's something that may not actually come out in conversation, and certainly wouldn't appear in your standard forms. But because you've got so many things up there, you've got a learner diary, you've got the individual learning plan, because they encourage learners to put up their comments, you're capturing much, much more than ever before. There's 24/7 access to those records for anyone who needs to see them, rather than a typical internal or external observation. You have to have your piles of files all ready. You just need to make sure that these people have a login to Moodle at a permission level that allows them to see these. The resources are absolutely tailor-made for each curriculum, so it is definitely not one size fits all, although we're hoping we can achieve that with PLP. And there's no doubt that Moodle adds value, because it's an easy system to maintain, even for those people who are not IT confident, whether we're talking about tutors or learners.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you said you use the online text assignment as a diary.
Uh-huh.
How does that work? Do you use it for each? Do you have a separate one for each week, or do you just have one which they just keep adding to?
We just have one which they keep adding to. And, well, online text assignment is basically just one HTML box. You could set up a separate learner diary for each week, so each week would have learner diary. But, I find it better to just set up one. And then you have to make sure in the settings that you allow resubmissions, because that allows learners to edit it each week. The value in having just one is that you've then got everything there just in one page. So, there may be a time when there's something that you haven't quite picked up during the course of a class, but you could go through your feedback, or you could go through the learners' comments, maybe, 10, 11, 12 weeks worth or whatever, and see that actually there's a bit of a trend there that you just hadn't really noticed before. So it is useful to just have it all there in one place.
Have you tried blogging?
Yes, we have, but I suppose it's a question of what your learners get used to using. I started off using online text assignment for learner diary, and so that's what they use. And occasionally some people do use the blog, but for slightly different things. I suppose the online text assignment as a learner diary is very much a sort of learner to me or learner to tutor, whereas the blog is to open to everybody, really.
Strange that we always felt that the blog was a dialogue with yourself, because in Moodle 1.9 there is no way of putting a comment there, so it's very much a one-sided thing. I don't know about that Moodle 2, if anyone's using Moodle 2. Can anyone comment on the blog? Because that always seems to be the missing part of it. I don't know, I'd be interested to see if that is the case. Any other questions?
I'm just piloting it with my French learners, and the next stage will be ESOL. We have a few ESOL classes which are, well, we've got level 1 and level 2 with IT, and there's quite a number of learners in those classes, so we'll pilot it with them next. And then we'll have, as a service, a fairly decent amount of data to sell it more widely. And also, I think it's going to be important to use it with learners whose first language is not English, because any problems that they have in navigating around, we could, try and sort out in terms of, user friendliness, usability of it, so that if we're sorting out problems for people who aren't native English speakers, then that will also hopefully sort out problems for people who are real IT novices. That's a theory anyway.
I was just wondering how your part-time tutors are sort of managing, do they see this as extra work, or are they making the transition?
Some of them are more enthusiastic about Moodle than others, but that's, par for the course, isn't it? I think setting up a template for courses has helped a lot, because a lot of things that are standard and can be uploaded and will be the same for every course just go in there. I can set up a learner diary, I can set up things like a glossary, and then it's just a case of the learners using those. When it comes to the ILP, I would imagine that initially some tutors will say, oh, come on, I only teach 2 hours a week and you want me to input all of this. But this is where I think it's important that I can talk about my experiences as a tutor as well as the Moodle developer, because it took me less time to put it all on Moodle than it did to, type it out, print out a page for each learner, copy it, make sure that there was a copy in my teaching file, that they had a copy, just shove it all on Moodle. It's much quicker.
People don't recognise that initially, do they? They need that time to absorb that fact.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think the big problem with a lot of RARPA evidence on Moodle is that it's not paper-based, and some people will want the ongoing confidence of having, file this thick, but, you don't need it, and this is much better evidence, and whoever needs to see it can have access to it. But it's getting over that it doesn't have to be paper-based. And in fact, if you go on to the Excellence Gateway, they say that if a RARPA system is just too paper-heavy, then it's not a good system. But it's getting people away from paper.
We had quite a lot of that issue to start with. Oh, we do it this way, this is how it works, we can't be bothered to learn this. And now, 6 months down the line, the feedback we get is such little niggly things, it's unbelievable. The main bulk of it, they just go on and ask you the questions.
Yeah.
I think you're right with the template thing being there. They don't have to go through the initial setup. If it's almost ready for them, they'll take it and use it. If they start from scratch, that could be a very important.
Yes, I'm on an eCPD forum somewhere, and someone was talking about PLPs, and I said, oh, you should try the Moodle one. And somebody else said, oh, well, it didn't do what we wanted it to do. Well, it's very flexible because it is a blank page. So you just have to think, well, how will your learners approach this? If you're the average level of IT skills is good, leave them with the blank, HTML editor, and they can do with it what they want. But otherwise, if you want to help them, or if there's a certain amount of information that you really want because your quality manager says you have to have it, then set up a template. But it's so flexible. You can do with it what you want. And you can see what wonderful things people have done with it.